Now, one thing is for sure about the Walt Disney Company and its CEO Bob Iger is that they are now in full-on desperation mode to get back on track when it comes to their success points with their movies, their television programs, even their merchandise, and everything to do with the merchandise sold in their theme parks. They really are trying to do everything better in 2025, and that is working to no avail because, let's face it, a lot of people have actually woke up and exactly are pointing out the obvious signs that Disney is still embracing DEI to this very day. If they really wanted to, they could have canceled things like Snow White, they could have canceled things out there like Ironheart by Marvel, and among others that are still in the works, that are still actually moving forward. However, beyond that, there is something much more involved going on right now between Bob Iger, the board of directors, the many executives over there. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new, and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. So one thing about Bob Iger is that he is your typical lying CEO. This is exactly why I like to call him Bob Iger. And we all know that he said a couple of months ago that, yeah, we're dialing back on the agenda. We are dialing back on DEI. And it's nothing more than a lie because, well, Bob Iger recently got caught doing one of the most disgraceful things any CEO could do, especially over at Disney. Let's get into this. Now, we already know that the Walt Disney Company is a company that really does not want to let go of DEI fully, and we know that they are trying to please everybody at this point, whether, through a sneaky tactic or through a direct way of saying, yeah, we're trying to balance things out here, but really they're not at the end of the day. Let's get into the overall details about what's going on with Bob Iger. Now again, we know that Bob Iger is very frantic as we speak. He wants to actually leave on a good note before he steps down in 2026. However, with the Walt Disney Company already in serious trouble after the failures of Snow White at the box office and other failures for both streaming and theatrical releases, one major development going on now involves how Disney CEO Bob Iger recently got caught doing one of the most disgraceful things yet behind the scenes from those high up in the corporate ladder after an emergency meeting was held between Iger and the board. Now, already Iger is in the process of creating a strategy that he hopes will contribute to the next CEO once he steps down, and most likely will, since this is in full support of the Disney board of directors. It turns out that Iger's plan to keep DEI alive and well, and the typical Disney agenda alive and well, is by releasing a combination of films and/or television programs that will support and not support DEI or any other agendas. The twist here from Iger's plan is that the projects that will hold no agenda are going to be used by the Disney Company to build up funds to use on DEI-driven projects in the near future, and also a way to please shareholders. This all comes in the midst of how Bob Iger was rejected by the board of directors, of course, at the Disney Company for an extra 3 years after Snow White's failure, since they actually flat out believed that his plans for DEI were becoming way too obvious to the average moviegoer. The plan by Disney now, and by Bob Iger right now, is to apply both DEI and non-DEI driven projects to brands like Star Wars, Marvel, and even the Disney live-action remakes. This is best described as a sneaky way by the Disney Company to create funds that will allow them to support DEI projects without failure, as long as they have a couple of major success points on their hands that will balance everything out in the process. Now, Disney is still reportedly doubling down on their agenda, driven, of course, iteration of Pirates of the Caribbean, along with other films that will shift away from the source material. Disney is already planning to use funds from other past hits and even upcoming success points like Lilo and Stitch. For example, Disney is already projecting this film to be a major success and plans to use funds from that film to be applied to future DEI projects. Now, a lot of this, as it turns out, is due in part by pleasing the top 3 shareholders, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. Now, guys, you may or may not know about this, but yes, they are the top 3 shareholders, and those top 3 shareholders, they are all about DEI. They want Disney to fully embrace DEI, and this is basically the best plan that Bob Iger can come up with right now to really kind of please them as shareholders, and to really please them that DEI will remain effective at the Disney Company in some way, shape, or form. Now, I don't know about you, but this is essentially Disney's very sneaky way to fund projects like Pirates of the Caribbean and other Star Wars projects and or Marvel projects that will double down on DEI again. So I can see what they're up to. Everyone's seeing through their overall strategy here is that, yes, they want to have a break, if you will, from DEI projects, only to fund other DEI-driven projects based on other success points, if that makes a lot of sense here. So expect a lot of those funds from Lilo and Stitch, or, for example, Deadpool and Wolverine, and others out there that are going to be utilized by the Disney Company to be used in other projects that are obviously not going to, relate to the common moviegoer, that will not relate to the common customer of the Disney Company. And I think that this is just going to show you exactly how unwilling Disney is to let go of DEI 110%, right? This just goes to show you that they lie all the time. Bob Iger lies all the time. And Disney is by far the worst studio in the Hollywood bubble within the film industry when it comes to the typical agenda, right? The typical message. So, moving on forward. However, it's not just that, but also Disney is already hoping that The Mandalorian and Grogu will be a global phenomenon at the box office that will allow them to double down and continue Kathleen Kennedy's legacy with DEI even after she's gone for other Star Wars projects by using funds from that box office success in 2026. This is something that executives are quite frankly worried about when it comes down to Disney and how this will backfire on the company. However, between Bob and the board, they are all happy about this strategy to please everybody, including the top 3 shareholders, and how they are also continuing their usage of DEI for all of their brands. Already, Bob Iger is planning to make a statement by the end of May to please shareholders, especially the top ones. Again, I think that BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, they're not the core of the issue per se. Yes, they are the ones influencing Disney to actually follow DEI, but Disney wholeheartedly wants to embrace DEI. It's not like they're being tricked to do this or they're being forced to do this by BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. They actually love doing this. You guys may or may not recall that infamous leaked video or leaked audio that they want 50-60% of this or that, whether it was Star Wars or Marvel, to support LGBTQ this or LGBTQ that in various different projects. And that really just backfired on Disney. You guys may recall back in 2023, that was a major point where Disney began to cave. However, interestingly enough, yet again, Bob Iger can seem to let things go. He can seem to let DEI go. He really does just wants this to actually move on to the next CEO, and I think at the end of the day, that's exactly why. Whoever comes on board after Bob Iger, it's not going to be for the better. I think if anything, it's just going to be a CEO that's going to be able to hide their plans for DEI better than Bob Iger was. But overall, I would like to hear what everyone has to say about the Disney Company, where it stands right now in 2025, and what looms for 2026. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.